โมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนัมมัสสามิ Blessings, good evening to you all. In a few days we celebrate Magha Puja, the full moon day in February, where we recollect the occasion when the Buddha and 1250 enlightened arahants came together. They say without prior announcement, so one of those miracles of the time of the Buddha. A lot of monks, enlightened monks, came together with no prior planning, and to commemorate that occasion, the Buddha taught the verses of what we know, what we call today the Awada Patimokkha. And there's many very simple but very practical and pertinent teachings in those verses. And the famous ones are Sabba Bhapasa Akaranang, abandoning all evil, Kusala Supasampada, perfecting the good or cultivating the good, Satchita Pariyotapanang, purifying your mind. Itang Buddhana Sasanang, this is the teaching of all Buddhas. We have our Buddha, Gautama the Buddha, but as far as we know there have been previous Buddhas, there will be a Maitreya Buddha in the future, and they all teach the same pathway to enlightenment. And centered around these three things: abandoning the unwholesome, cultivating the wholesome, purifying the mind. So this has often been used by many meditators, Buddhist practitioners, as a very simple daily reflection, or even a moment-by-moment reflection in their practice. In our Dhamma practice, we have many qualities that we're developing together. Sometimes the most simple way of describing practice is establishing mindfulness, present moment awareness, and then reflecting on the truth, knowing the truth of what's going on, and then acting accordingly. So once you've established mindfulness and you're clear in your mind, maybe you see some unskillful thoughts coming up, an unskillful intention. So straight away you may say, this is what I have to abandon. When there's clarity, then our wisdom, our intelligence can see clearly what needs to be done. Or perhaps after a series or a period of time where one's mind keeps falling into unwholesome, unskillful states, finally the clarity arises, I should be developing the skillful. So say you've been angry for a while, sooner or later you might have that moment where you say, this is no good, this is leading to more suffering, this is to be abandoned, and I should be cultivating the opposite, goodwill or forgiveness, compassion, whatever the situation. So these simple instructions, abandoning evil, cultivating good, purifying the mind, our practice centers around them every day, and one can use them as constant reminders of what we're doing. Many people, Buddhists and non-Buddhists, ask us, how do you actually practice? What are you doing when you practice? What do you do anyway? What do monks do anyway? Today we had a group from the Yarra Rangers Interfaith Network come to the monastery. So a group of very diverse group, men and women from different faiths, religions, coming to the monastery to find out more about Buddhism. So this is a common question, how do you practice and what do you do when you're practicing? Well, this is one answer, isn't it? What the Buddha taught on the night or the day of Magha Puja. We're abandoning the unwholesome, cultivating the wholesome, and purifying our mind. When all of the unwholesome mental states and tendencies and habits have been abandoned, and the path of wholesome Dhammas and the cultivation of wholesome Dhammas has been developed, sooner or later the mind becomes purified. Because the most wholesome Dhamma of all is the wisdom that sees that all phenomena, physical and mental, are impermanent, unsatisfactory, not self. What we say, anicca, dukkha, anatta. This is what ultimately purifies the mind. But these three parts of the practice, abandoning the unwholesome, cultivating the wholesome, purifying the mind, they work together. They're different sides of the same thing. So developing the Eightfold Path, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, mindfulness, wisdom, this is all the development and cultivation of wholesome Dhammas, wholesome states of mind. And the effect is a purification is going on. You're gradually changing the way you think. Could even call it a revolution, a Dhamma revolution. Completely revolutionize the way you look at yourself and the world, what you see, changing your values. So you start to value more and more what is wholesome and skillful and contributing to your happiness and the happiness of others, and abandoning and giving up what is unskillful and only brings you suffering or brings others suffering. And I don't know if other people are the same, but when I first started reading Buddhist books and practicing, that was all very new to me. So I had endless moments of, why didn't I think of this before? The Buddha is so wise. Why didn't I realize this? Exactly like the Buddha is saying, you give up greed, you feel better. You abandon anger, you feel better. You abandon conceit, arrogance, laziness, fear, anxiety, despair, pretty much all the negative mind states that causes suffering. Any one of them you abandon, you start to feel better immediately. How do you abandon them? That's where the rest of the path comes in, the cultivation of the wholesome, developing generosity, mindfulness, virtuous conduct of body and speech, states of calm, samadhi, and then wisdom through developing insight into the true nature of things. That's what you're cultivating. And whether you do it a little bit or a lot, if you do it a little bit, you get a little bit more peaceful. You get a little bit of clarity. You get a little bit happier. If you do it a lot, you get more clarity, more peace, more purification of the mind. So this teaching, that we have inherited, such a valuable one, like so many of the Buddha's explanations of how suffering arises, say the Four Noble Truths, or the Eightfold Path, how the suffering arises, how to deal with it, what we can do about it, how to let go or end suffering. There's so many teachings that are so profound, but often they can reduce down to very simple phrases that we can carry around, easy enough to remember, and you can carry them out around with you, and then you whip them out like a little tool at the right moment when you're struggling or having some problem. So, at any moment in your day, you can ask, am I abandoning the unwholesome, or am I abandoning the wholesome and cultivating the unwholesome? We do that, don't we? When we do get angry or fall into some kind of selfish greed or worried, anxious, at that moment we're often doing the very opposite of what the Buddha taught. So if you can establish some awareness at that moment, you have to pause the process. And that's one of the functions of mindfulness. Anytime you gain more mindfulness and clarity or clear comprehension of what's going on, what you're doing, what you're saying, what you're thinking, then you have a chance to get a little bit closer to the Buddha, closer to the peaceful mind, the mind that's still, happy even. Simply by recognizing what you're doing, waking up to the truth. So if you are holding on to more negative mind states, as you establish some clarity, that's where you let go. If you're doing something that is destructive to you, to others, as you wake up to that truth, then you stop, you change, you pause. So sometimes wisdom can lead the practice. We hear a lot about the practice of mindfulness, and mindfulness is the mechanism where a lot of this Dhamma practice works. To abandon the unwholesome, you have to be mindful. To cultivate the wholesome, you have to be mindful. But wisdom also is vital in this process. A lot of our practice is led by just reminding ourselves of teachings of the truth, bringing them up, contemplating them, trying to apply them in a situation. And it may be just asking that question, am I abandoning the unwholesome, cultivating the wholesome at this very moment? What am I doing? Another thing you realize over time practicing is that there's layers of unwholesomeness and layers of wholesomeness, layers of good and evil in our mind. And sometimes you're doing something that's partially good, but there's still a little bit of the unwholesome, the unskillful in there, underneath the surface perhaps. It's not always 100% pure yet, especially in the beginning of our practice when we're not that fully aware. So there's always more that we have to investigate and reflect on. You see that quite often when you're doing something good. So maybe you're helping somebody, or you're doing some act of kindness or act of service in your family or your workplace or in a monastery. On the surface and basically you're doing something good, but as you're doing it, a little bit of sense of conceit can slip in, can't it? So you start to feel good about the good that you're doing and like it and feel maybe proud in a slightly attached way. Maybe there's that little look to see if anyone notices the good that you've done, rather than just doing it. When you're fully mindful, you just do things and they're right, correct, good, and you just do it without a second thought, and you let go and move on, you might say. But when there's some hesitation there, maybe some of the unskillful is still there in the mind, hasn't been fully abandoned in that moment. So then it's like, I did this good thing, but did anyone notice? Did anyone recognize it? And sometimes we even help the process along a bit and have to tell someone what we did, remind them what we did, tell them how good we are and how much we've sacrificed and how much effort we put in, looking for that kind of spiritual pat on the back. So some good may have been done as well, but then something that's a little bit more subtle, some subtle negativity or attachment comes in to the action. And of course, where there's attachment or an unwholesome state of mind, then suffering is not far away, is it? So if you don't you're looking for the recognition of the good you've done, but then it doesn't come, nobody notices that supreme sacrifice you made for the world, whatever it may be. You're doing some job that no one else wants to do and you've done it, but nobody noticed. If you've got that little bit of conceit there, then you feel disappointed that nobody saw you, or even angry. I did all that and nobody appreciates me. So there's always more, we say, to unpack, or more layers of self, more layers of the wholesome and the unwholesome to observe and check as we're practicing, going along in our practice. It's not always simple, kind of black and white, cut and dry kind of thing. You can do something good and then the demand for recognition slips in. Or you do something bad and you try and cover it up by doing something good immediately after. And we do that as well. And that's probably still better than nothing, but still it's not quite the same, is it? Doing something not very wholesome and sort of trying to cover it up with something a little bit better or a little bit wholesome on the top. So the wholesome and the unwholesome, the good, the bad, the good and the evil, are often very close together. And this is karma. We've lived our life, been born into the world, lived our life, and we've developed all kinds of habits, good and bad. And a lot of our practice is working to cultivate the good habits more, bring them up, develop them, and abandon the bad habits. But habit, by its nature, is a behavior pattern maybe that you don't always see because it's a habit. Could be just a way of thinking, or speaking, or acting, doing. And habit is like, often there's delusion there, you're just not fully aware, you're just acting out of habit. And that's why we have to learn how to establish mindfulness and reflect on our behavior over and over again. It's one of the most frustrating, tiring parts of meditation practice, or just general practice of the Buddha's teachings, is that you're constantly seeing your mind drop away from being mindful into a state of being less mindful or completely unmindful. You drop away from the present moment into daydreaming, or some strong emotion comes up and you get caught into a negative train of anger or some desire, some greed. And then you're having to work to find ways to drop that and come back to the present moment, re-establish mindfulness. You see it all the time in meditation, but even just generally, work and in other aspects of our life. The mind is constantly wandering away like a stray sheep or a stray cow or something, and you're constantly having to bring it back and teach it what it needs to be taught. And that's tiring, and that's one of the main kind of spiritual tiredness you get, the frustration of working with a stubborn mind, working with habits that are so ingrained that you feel like you'll never change. And that's why faith, a little bit of faith, confidence in the Buddha and maybe living teachers like Ajahn Chah or other teachers helps, because it gives you some of the confidence and the willingness to work with your mind, because you can see other people have benefited from the practice, so why can't you? If they can do it, why can't I? And there are monks, nuns, men, women, from the time of the Buddha till this present day who have practiced, have benefited. So sometimes we have to remind ourselves of them, remind ourselves of what they did, listen to their teachings, follow their example, to get our own energy up to deal with this fact that the mind is a very frustrating thing. And we get tired training it. When Ajahn Chah went to the West, to Europe, USA, one of the things he noticed was that Buddhists, they love to go on meditation retreats and become very strict and disciplined for periods of time. Maybe they keep noble silence, keep the precepts very strictly, don't mix with anyone, get into their practice, do many hours of sitting and walking meditation. But when the retreat's over, they just give it all up. They let it all go. This is the unskillful letting go of the practice. Rather than letting go of the unwholesome, they let go of the wholesome and go home and, drinking, partying, whatever it is, the more unskillful habits slip back in straight away. Or sometimes very mundane things, just talking a lot. People, Ajahn Chah used to say, you sit for an hour meditating, put all that effort in to bring up mindfulness, let go of the hindrances, the distractions. And when you finish, you're kind of proud of yourself, happy with yourself, and you go off, and because you're happy with this effort you put into your meditation, you want to tell everyone about it and meet your friends, and you're meditating for 1 hour, but then you go off and speak and socialize for 2 hours, and it's all gone. Whatever good you develop has flown away like water out of a leaky barrel. And this is one of the challenges of practice, is to practice regularly, continuously, over and over again, and be willing to pick yourself up when you've got lost in another period of bad habits or trains of thought that are not guided by mindfulness and wisdom. We're just back into the land of the imagination or moods or daydreams, strong attachments coming up, all the stories and the images we hold on to in our mind. And we slip back into that so easily. So we have to keep reminding ourselves of the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. Keep coming back to putting effort into the practice to deal with this fact that the mind just loves to drop away from the Dhamma back to the more unskillful states. One of the supports for our practice is associating with wise fellow practitioners, good people who also have faith in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. And you see that in a non-Buddhist country like Australia, where there's every kind of religion or non-religion, and society is very free, very open, and Buddhists are often quite hard to find out in society. So you have to rely on associating with fellow practitioners once you've found them, because they're not that easy to find, and they're not that easy to spend time with, because it's a non-Buddhist country. So you see the value of, say, coming to monasteries or Buddhist centres and participating in events, because you get a little bit of support from the people around you when you consciously do that. And Magga Puja is one of the reminders of the value of Sangha. And we do benefit from, as monks or monastics, we benefit from living together, seeing each other, guiding each other by example, being there just to remind each other of how to practice or to do the practice, because our minds so easily go off to the world. We get a lot from Sangha or community, and that includes the lay community of Buddhists as well. If you're totally alone, maybe you've got faith in Buddhism and you've read the books and you've done some meditation and you think, I'm off, I'm going to do it. But if you're totally alone without a teacher or without a good friend in the Dhamma, it's not impossible to progress, but it's so easy to lose heart, isn't it? To stray from the path. So one of the factors that helps to bring up continuity in our practice is associating with other practitioners, valuing what we get from Sangha. Ajahn Chah used to emphasize Magha Puja a lot. He'd call it Sangha Day, and he'd get all the monks, not just from his own monastery, but from all the branch monasteries in the area to come together and practice together for a day and a night. Because it can be inspiring, it can be a chance to exchange experience in the Dhamma, listen to Dhamma teachings, discuss the Dhamma, and just get some fresh inspiration. Because when you're on your own, it's so hard, isn't it? It's so easy just that your battery gets flat and you sort of peter out like a car with a flat battery. You just can't go on anymore. Whereas when you meet with other practitioners, monks or laity, you get a bit more of a boost. Like they say, boost. Your vaccine may be running dry if you had a vaccine a long time ago, so you need a booster. Maybe the booster is you come to a monastery or a place where others are practicing, or you just arrange to meet fellow practitioners for meditation sessions and listening to the Dhamma, because we can help each other that way. We live in the forest here, so you always see the truth that when there are many trees in the forest growing together, they support each other. They support each other. Trees will shield other trees from the wind, so the trees, they protect each other from the more extreme winds of storms and so on. And their roots bind together, so they kind of hold each other up. You see sometimes even a tree, it's being blown over partially by the wind, but then it leans on another tree and it stays alive, so it starts growing, leaning on the next tree. But the Buddha said, monks are like trees in that sense. We can support each other, and the laity too. You can support each other in the Dhamma. And what is a true friend? Well, somebody who encourages you to abandon the unwholesome, cultivate the wholesome, and purify your mind in whatever way, either by example or even by words. But again, one of the problems with words is even if you know the right words, but you're maybe not so advanced or so well practiced yourself, you can also put people off, can't you, when you start telling them the word of the Dhamma too quickly, too early, too easily. And we're very good at telling other people what they should be doing in the practice. And we may think, we're doing it out of friendship, supporting them, and that part of that intention is there. But then if we aren't that well practiced ourselves, it just comes across as just sort of empty words, and they can put people off as much as they support them. So how we treat each other, how we treat our fellow practitioners is important. There's a time and place how to bring up the Dhamma, and you have to look at the results of what you're saying. So if you're telling them the Dhamma and encouraging them to meditate more or do this or do that or let go of this, let go of that, and they're not responding very well and getting upset, well, that's a sign maybe you've picked the wrong time, the wrong place, the wrong way to do it. And that's important as well. That's where the unwholesome, the wholesome get mixed in together sometimes. It's very common in a meditation center or a monastery. Someone's had some good meditation and then they want to tell everyone else how they should be meditating, whereas someone else may be struggling, very unhappy, depressed. So they're out of sync. It doesn't match. So this abandoning the unwholesome, cultivating the wholesome, can be quite a subtle thing. And you have to keep reflecting back, looking back at your conduct, your state of mind, and then if it's concerning other people, you have to really ask yourself, am I helping them in their practice or am I hindering them? Am I encouraging them in the right way or am I actually putting them off? Because we can do both. One person has really strong faith and wants to spread the word of the Buddha, and everyone else is saying, "Oh, here comes that guy again, I don't want to listen to them anymore." In Thailand you get that. So Ajahn Chah's monastery, they sometimes have these all-night teaching sessions where you get many monks giving talks through the night, and they have one monk whose job is to be on the bell. And in one night you're bound to get at least one monk who gets too enthusiastic and too much faith, and he'll just start talking and talking and talking and bringing up everything he can possibly think about the Dhamma, feeling very inspired and happy to tell everyone, but everyone else is falling asleep. So after a while there'll be a bell rang. Even in the middle of his talk, mid-sentence, you'll have to stop. And that's the rule. So sometimes we can have Dhamma proliferation, they say, where we have faith, but maybe the mindfulness, the wisdom is just slipping a little bit, and we go off into Dhamma proliferation, telling everyone else about how good the Dhamma is. But maybe we haven't picked the right time or the right occasion or the right audience. For monks, we have a joke, we say, there's some monks who are always looking for an audience. Like they want to help people, they have a kind heart, but maybe they're not yet skilled in teaching, so they're always looking for a captive audience. And they sit somebody down and they have to tell them how good the Dhamma is. Whether the person wants to hear it or not, that's a different issue. There was one monk I know, he loved to give talks and tell everyone how the Buddha taught and explain whatever he could about the Dhamma, and he would sit up there. And then Ajahn Chah saw that he talked a lot, so he sent him off to a really quiet monastery where the abbot didn't like to give talks and didn't have Dhamma talk sessions for the laity. It's a monastery where hardly any Dhamma preaching was done. And this monk was sent off there, and within a week he walked back to Ajahn Chah. He couldn't stand it because he couldn't talk to anyone. He had no outlet for his Dhamma. So sometimes we say some people are full of Dhamma, but not in a good way. It's like they're full to overflowing and they just got to tell everyone else how good it is. But it can be actually become a little bit irritating or put pressure on people. Of course, there's the others who never talk at all, and that can be a problem. Some people just never explain anything, never tell anything. You don't quite know what's going on. So sometimes it is useful to be able to explain at least some Dhamma, and that's why these simple phrases that the Buddha chose and used are so useful for that. Someone may not speak very much, but they know enough just to explain what the Buddha said. So somebody comes to them, what did the Buddha teach? He taught to abandon all unwholesome mental states, cultivate the wholesome mental states, purify your mind. So three simple lines that will do for the ones who don't like to talk very much. Maybe they can keep them in reserve for the time when they're put on the spot. When you're a young monk, sometimes they ask you to give a talk when you don't really want to, or you feel you're not ready. So you have to get a few lines like that. In Thailand, they put you on a high seat. When I'd been a monk for 6 rains, I went to see Ajahn Buddhadasa because I was staying in a monastery nearby. And Ajahn Buddhadasa was a very great meditation master and a scholar. He's a great Buddhist teacher in southern Thailand, and very popular with foreigners because he was very kind and would teach foreigners, run meditation retreats, get his teachings translated. So he's done a lot of good for Buddhism. His books are well known. And over the years I liked to go and visit him when I had a chance, just to hear him talk, stay in the monastery. He had a very lovely presence, very peaceful but very wise, and always had something good to say about the Dhamma. So I went to stay with him to study and learn, not to teach. I was the student. So I was staying there for a few weeks, and very happy. I had a kuti, I was meditating in the forest, I'd go out, listen to him speak, and my meditation was going very well. I had lots of time to put effort into my meditation, so I was quite content. And then one day I was just sitting meditation about 3 in the afternoon, and there was a knock on the door of my hut. And I opened the door, and there was this layman, and he said, it's time for your Dhamma talk. I said, what Dhamma talk? This was all in Thai. By then I could speak reasonable Thai. And he said, we've got some people from Nakhon Si Thammarat, they've come up for a Dhamma talk, and they asked for you to give the Dhamma talk. I said, where are these people? And they said, they're in the meditation hall. I knew nothing about this, it was news to me. So I walked out of my kuti, followed the man, took my robe, and said, okay, so did anyone arrange this? He said, no, we've just arrived and we need a Dhamma talk because we're all new in the monastery and we're here to meditate. I guess someone had pointed him in my direction. So we walked over to the hall and I sat down, and there were 500 people sitting. And they said, can we have a Dhamma talk on meditation in Thai? And I'd never done that properly before. I'd given like a few small 1-minute talks. And they wanted sort of something a bit more like a lecture. So they did have a high seat, so they put me on the high seat. And off I went. And I just talked the best I could. And they seemed happy. I tried to string a little bit more together than simply abandon the unwholesome, cultivate the wholesome, purify your mind. I told them a little bit about the practice of mindfulness and developing samadhi and then contemplating vipassana. A very ordinary, standard kind of talk on Buddhism. And at the end they said, thank you for the talk. And I said, do you know that's the first public talk I've ever given? They said, really? Okay, we're going to make a book out of it. So they made a book out of it, printed it into a book and distributed it all over Thailand. So these things can happen. Some people speak little, some speak a lot, some want to speak, some don't want to speak. One thing's for sure, you never get what you want in life. Even if you're a Dhamma speaker, you don't get what you want. Even if you just want to be alone in a cave, be a hermit in a cave with no one bothering you, you'll probably find someone bothers you. It's happened to me before, staying in a cave, totally pitch black, just wanting to meditate and not have anything to do with anyone. And then a whole group of Buddhists came up with some monks and lay people, about 30 people invaded my cave one day to come and talk to me. So this will happen. You go somewhere quiet and people will come. Or if you're feeling lonely and you want to talk to people, you go looking for people and sometimes you never find anyone. You never quite get what you want. Because that's life, isn't it? That's what the Buddha taught. Not getting your wishes fulfilled is dukkha, and it's part of life. You get some of your wishes fulfilled, but not all of them. Sometimes you get what you want, sometimes you get what you don't want. Sometimes you're separated from what you want. Even teaching Dhamma, even meditating can be like that. I know one monk who was in a cave, he was so determined to be on his own and be very strict. And when a couple went up to see him, just out of curiosity, he shouted at them so loudly out of the darkness, they thought he was a ghost or some kind of a ogre or yaka. They call him a yaka. They came running out of the caves, so scared. They ran to the abbot of the monastery. They said, we found the yaka. And the abbot was confused. He didn't know there'd been a yaka living in his monastery. They said, where's the yaka? They said, it's that, up in that cave, pointing to the cave where the monk was staying. And he said, that monk. He's the angry monk. He's so unhappy in his cave. He's so lonely and he's struggling, being in a cave for so long. He's become very angry. So I think he took his anger out on you. They said they were so angry they actually wet themselves. Not so angry, they were so afraid they wet themselves as they were running out of the cave because they really thought it was some kind of monster. So even a peaceful monk, when they get angry, can become like a monster. That's the mind when it doesn't get what it wants. You want peace, but then you get disturbed. Or you want people, but no one comes. Or you don't want people, and then someone comes. Or you're meditating, you want to experience some blissful state, but you don't get it. Or maybe you get your blissful state, and then you lose it. The mind is like this. It's very uncertain, very unsure. This is why we need some wisdom and we need to reflect. What am I doing right now? Am I cultivating the wholesome or the unwholesome? If you're giving into your anger, that's cultivating the unwholesome. That's not following what the Buddha taught. It's totally normal, natural to get angry, but the question is, what do you do when you get angry? Do you hold on to it, indulge it, cultivate it, or do you put effort into letting it go? When you have some obsessive greed, you really got to get this thing, you can't think of anything else, and you're just full of greed and it's making you maybe very agitated or behave in a selfish way to try and get what you want. Is that cultivating the wholesome or cultivating the unwholesome? You have to ask yourself. And over time you get to see, don't you? If you keep following the unwholesome, far from purifying your mind, you end up with a mind full of unwholesome dhammas. It's not peaceful. It's full of anger, fear, worry, agitation. If you cultivate the wholesome, you get the other effect. You get a mind that starts to let go, relax, be at ease with itself. It feels good. It starts to experience happiness. The happiness of letting go. Then you understand, oh, this mind can be purified. Greed, anger, confusion can be abandoned. Kindness, mindfulness, wisdom can be developed. But it's up to us. We're the one in charge. We're the one who has to take responsibility. Even when you have good friends and support in your practice, in the end you have to do the practice. Your friends, your teachers can only lead you to it, to do it, but you have to be the one who does the practice. And you have to keep coming back to it, willing to create the good habits and develop the good habits, willing to abandon the unskillful habits, and just willing to do it over and over again. And little by little, that's the way our mind can be purified. We don't have to worry how long it will take. 1 lifetime, 100 lifetimes, doesn't matter. Just imagine if the Buddha had been like a modern meditator, the modern mindfulness practitioner. How many hours till I get enlightened? How many days? How many weeks till I get enlightened? The Buddha would have given up long ago. The Buddha didn't think like that because he knew, I'm in it for the long haul. However long it takes, I'm just going to do it. And the Buddha was practicing for a long time, many lifetimes before he was a Buddha. He was a bodhisattva. They call it the path of exhaustion or the path of tiredness. The one thing a bodhisattva can't be afraid of is tiredness. Yeah, definitely you'll get tired, but it's in a good cause, and tiredness itself comes and goes. It's another condition, it's not permanent. But imagine if the Buddha was sitting there as a bodhisattva, not yet enlightened. Oh, when am I going to get enlightened? Oh dear, it's taking so long. Oh dear, my practice is going so difficult at the moment. I might as well just give up. If the Buddha had thought like that, then it wouldn't be anything, wouldn't it? There'd be no Buddhism, no Dhamma, no Four Noble Truths. We'd all be in a real mess. So it's because the Buddha was willing to go through the obstacles and the challenges, and then out of compassion he was willing to teach us. And then there's other teachers since the Buddha, like Ajahn Kalyano, also willing to do what it takes, practice, and then come back and teach people like ourselves. that we can practice. So that's the kind of effort and commitment we have to try and build up. Just bring up the effort, keep doing it, don't think about how long it will take, just do it. And Ajahn Chah used to say that, just do it. Don't think too much about it, don't think how long, when will I get results, just do it. Once you do it, then good things can happen. So maybe I'll leave you with those reflections tonight and wish you all well.